Morning.
Hopefully we're ready with the live stream.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. The time is 9:41. We're continuing our tradition of starting a little bit late. We are in the process of setting up a lot of technical details so that our agenda will go smoothly today. So let me start first with roll call.
Commissioner Aguirre?
Here.
Commissioner Barava?
Here.
Commissioner Dye?
Here.
Commissioner DeGuilio?
Here.
Commissioner Filkins Weber?
Here.
Commissioner Forbes?
Here.
Commissioner Galambas Malloy?
Here.
Commissioner Ontai?
Here.
Commissioner Parvenu? Commissioner Raya?
Here.
Commissioner Ward?
Here.
Commissioner Yao?
Here.
Commissioner Blanco?
Here. Thank you. Seeing that we have a quorum, we're going to go ahead. So the first order of business today will be the selection of a replacement commissioner. We have a number of other items on our agenda. If you refer to the items for discussion that we passed out on Wednesday, including going over the minutes, approving the final staff schedules, and hopefully be able to do approval of a number of positions that we're trying to fill this week. Also, note that you should have received a handout with the changes to the advisory subcommittee assignments. So it's in your stack of handouts. So if you want to just take a quick look at that, we can take care of that item just quickly. Are there any more of these? Here, take a look at mine. Okay. So note that these are subject to change. Obviously, the minute we swear in our 14th commissioner, he or she will probably want to join one of these, so we may rejigger it again, but just for now. This is just for information. Unless there are any inaccuracies, it's already been posted on the website. Okay, so let's go ahead and, sorry, one other thing I wanted to mention is that we will have 2 expert presentations this afternoon at 2 o'clock and immediately following probably around 3:30, and that should inform a lot of our discussion about our outreach efforts. So we will be also looking at finalizing a potential agenda so that it can be noticed for our meeting in Claremont, a potential outreach meeting there. So I think that it would be appropriate to talk about that after the expert presentations. Okay, with that, we will go ahead with the selection of a replacement commissioner. As we discussed before, just as a reminder, we are going to, each of us, select 3 potential choices. This will be projected up on the screen so that all that information is available to the public on how we voted. And when you propose your candidates, say a little bit about why you've chosen these 3 candidates. And again, the criteria that we talked about are the ones required under the Voters First Act, including geographic diversity, race and ethnic diversity, the gender and economic status, and the last one that we had added was skill sets, what they can contribute to the commission in terms of actual skills, and in that, of course, we include ability to work well with the 13 commissioners who are already seated. So please say a little bit about your choices when you put them up, and then after everyone has had a chance to put their votes up, we will take the top 3 vote getters and then move on to the next round. Are there any questions?
I just have a logistical question. I'm not sure if it's for now or for later, so you can help me. I'm assuming the material that we've been given was distributed to the public as well?
It's going, yeah,
okay.
it's...
I have a question about the map in terms of its accuracy, so I didn't know if we wanted to do it now or later.
Sure. Can we get the map projected up there?
With the stars or asterisks.
Okay.
I see it looks like there's only 5 yellow stars, so maybe we want to clarify that. I believe there's maybe 2 on top of each other for Los Angeles, for the yellows being the 6.
There are 2.
Yeah, I just want to clarify because it looks visually that there's just 5. And also, it looks as if Commissioner Kuo is still on there, if I'm not mistaken, in one of the red stars.
That's probably correct.
Okay,
yes,
I just want to make sure
Santa
that
Clara.
we know that there is actually just 2 red stars. She's in.
And can you remove the red star from Santa Clara County?
Thank you, that's all.
Is it possible for you to edit that live?
No, it's gone. It's gone.
Nope. Okay.
That's fine.
So just as a note to the public, while we're working on moving the red star, please be advised that the red star in Santa Clara was represented former Commissioner Elaine Kuo and is no longer there. So we'll work on getting those up. There we go. Okay. So, Ms. Osborne, why don't you switch to the voting sheet? And we'll come back to the map a little bit later. Okay. So, as everyone can see, we have the 7 Democratic candidates up there, and across the top and along the side, we have each of the commissioners. And would any of the commissioners like to start?
Can I just ask one more logistical question?
Sure.
It sounds like we're going to individually, as I understand it, to individually offer up and maybe say word. Since it's my understanding we have 3 votes each,
Correct.
and if those 3 votes are taken by other people, we just reiterate. We're just doing our first round at this point.
Correct. Everyone has 3
So
votes.
it's not a matter of once that person's been nominated. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, who would like to start? All right, Commissioner Galambos Malloy is the brave person who is going to start.
All right, so I will throw out my 3 picks in no particular order, and I'll, as background, say I think across all these candidates through their interviews felt like they would be a strong fit in terms of working relationships, personality-wise. That was also a consideration that folks had thrown out they were interested in. So I could see all these folks just jumping right in. The first person I would put up is somebody who really ranked high even back in December as we were thinking about the final 6 additions to the commission, Lillian Judd, who is, I think the things that really stood out to me for her application was her background doing advertising, public relations, market research, all things that could really help us in getting the word out, doing our outreach. I think the geographic diversity considerations are significant. She comes from the Central Coast area, from San Luis Obispo. She has a wealth of project management experience, which is something we will be in need of across the commission. And also she's on the more end of the modest end of the economic scale, which given the statistics we've heard about the average income in the state of California, I think is an important consideration. So Lillian Judd is my first pick, not in order that I would vote for them, just in order I'm talking about them. The second person I will put for consideration is Maria Harris from Los Angeles, Southern Coastal Region. I think given the size of Los Angeles County, it would make sense to have an additional commissioner coming from that area. Also, her professional experience, some of the things she mentioned were around managing a weekly newspaper and the research and writing tasks that went along with that. Also, her expertise around providing technical assistance on how boards function, roles and responsibilities, running effective meetings. Clearly, from our experience together over the recent weeks, those would be skills that we could really take advantage of. Also is on towards the more modest end of the economic scale. The third person I would put up is Angelo Ancetta. And while there are considerations in terms of what he would look like for the diversity mix on the commission, I do feel like as a commission we are already diverse in the 13 members we have, and his technical expertise that he brings around the Voting Rights Act and around redistricting is something that we are very lacking in right now. We have only really one commissioner that brings a commissioner that brings some Voting Rights Act background. We have another commissioner or two who've been involved in local redistricting efforts. So those are the three folks I would put up for consideration.
Thank you, Commissioner. Who would like to go next? Commissioner Forbes.
Okay. My three, again, in no particular order, and I do think I would agree that we are blessed with 7 people who can do the job. I personally did not feel any constraint, and it was really quite a freeing experience regarding both regional or ethnically, because I thought that we were very diverse, and we were safe in that regard. Those are going to be taken care of regardless of who we picked. So having said that, and again, this is not in any particular order, my first listed was Victoria Schupbach, and I picked her in large part because of her NLRB experience. I thought she had really, that's a very diverse experience. She's used to dealing with, I think in a very fair way, with labor and management. And I think that's almost, in some ways, it's similar to placing a judge on the commission. My second choice was also Mr. Ancetta. I had a slightly, the redistricting experience was important to me, but also I was taken by the fact that he had been on the board of directors of the California Rural Legal Assistance, and so he had experience with dealing with the Central Valley, low-income residents in rural and agricultural areas, and recognized my own very strong powers in the area. I think we could use some more of that. And lastly, my third choice was Anne Marie Machamber. I'm sorry? Machamber, sorry. And I was impressed by the fact that she was relatively young, and I thought that her experience at the being a program person at the junior college level was good, but also, frankly, I was impressed by the fact that she was named as one of the 40 under 40 leaders of the Native American community nationally, and that I think would be of use to us.
Thank you, Commissioner Forbes. Commissioner Raya?
My three choices are, I go also with Lillian Judd. She was one of my nominees, so to speak, in the beginning. And apart from the qualifications and experience that have already been discussed, I do think that the geographic diversity is something that could be enhanced with her presence. My other two choices are Maria Harris. I'll second everything that Commissioner Galambos-Malloy said, but add one thing, and that is that she has been very active in her local communities. So she has, I think, a really good sense of how to connect, way down on that local level with people. And my third choice would be Tangerine Brigham. Some of my consideration there was obviously, they all to me appeared to have relatively equal skills in terms of outreach, experience working with different ethnic communities, but I think that would also be a good addition in terms of our racial diversity.
Commissioner Aguirre?
Yes, thank you very much. Certainly, I appreciate the makeup of the present committee, given the variety of personalities and levels of enthusiasm and I think overall a very diverse background for this commission. And I want to recognize the work of the original three panelists who put together and sifted through almost 34,000 applications to get down to the 14, and here we are at the end of the road, kind of looking for one replacement out of potentially all of those, even though we're down to just 6 or 7. So my selections, in no particular order, are Victoria Aguayo Shupak. I was impressed with the fact that she has worked with the National Labor Relations Board, and I think within that she came across as somebody who can be unbiased in dealing with issues, and also the issue of labor and workplace democracy to me were very important as background, and of course she mentions that she is fluent in Spanish as well, which I think would be of great benefit to us. My second choice, not in priority, would be Angelo Ancheta, and his previous involvement with Redistricting, I think, is a big plus. He has been involved in civil rights and immigrants' rights, and as was mentioned before, has worked with CRLA, and in that regard, I think is in touch with the rural community and rural issues throughout California. And of course, it's good to have somebody who's familiar with the Voting Rights Act and on a technical level. And then my third one would be Lillian Judd. She works with the Community Action Agency in San Luis Obispo, and as a CAP agency, then they are the premier, or one of the premier, poverty-fighting agencies in the country, being that there's about 1,000 of those, and those are result from the war on poverty, so-called war on poverty programs from the mid-'60s that really dealt with issues of exclusion, especially economic exclusion, and at that time the lack of empowerment of minority communities. So overall, I think she would do very well. The fact that she's from the Central Coast, I think, is also good because of the fact that when we look at the map, there's really a blank area there. So those would be my three.
Thank you. Who would like to go next? Commissioner Antai?
It's amazing. We picked the same three. I picked Lillian Judd for all the reasons that Gavin just mentioned. Her tremendous background in outreach, and she is in a central part of the state, and I do feel we need to have some representation from that area. My second choice is Angelo Ancheta. His tremendous background in in VRA issues, I think is going to be helpful to this commission as we proceed in the next 6.5 months. And my third is Victoria Shupak. And again, for all the reasons that were mentioned by Commissioner Aguirre, I think she's well qualified to join this commission.
Thank you. Next. Okay, Commissioner Filkins-Weber.
Thank you. I need not repeat what many of my colleagues have already spoken about in regard to my selection. Again, in no particular order. I would like to remind this commission as well, though, that it appears based on some of the comments that have been made that there are certain hierarchies being placed on some of the categories that we've looked at. The last 6 not being privy to our actual meeting of December 10th and taking a look at some of the suggestions that we've made, and also looking at the Voters First Act, which does require us to still look at geographic diversity, racial diversity. We do pride ourselves on the fact that this commission is well diverse, but we certainly must keep that in mind as well. My first selection, in no particular order, Lillian Judd. One thing I would like to point out, other than everything that has been said about her, is also the geographic diversity that she does bring in San Luis Obispo. Excuse me, bridging the gap between that area where it was blank on our map. My second selection is Anne Marie McAmer. Again, as I think has been spoken of previously, I think she's a very well-spoken individual. She has formal training in statistics. I certainly appreciate and admire her award as a tribal spokesperson. I believe that she has a very good sense of humor and certainly would get along well with all of us. And my final selection is Bright Star Olson. She is in Northern California, but she has an interesting background as far as being, I'm sorry?
You just put up the wrong one. It's
Anne?
not Tangerine Green. Sorry.
I believe if I recall correctly, she has a background of being Nicaraguan, which I thought brought even greater diversity to her ethnic category that she selected. She has worked in public policy. She has experience in community meetings, breakout groups. Overall, I also was interested in her background in anthropology. So that would be my last vote. Thank you.
Commissioner Ward.
Thank you. My 3 choices in no particular order are Lillian Judd, Anne Marie McAmer, and Angelo Anchetta. All 3 are excellent choices.
Thank you. Next. Who would like to go next? I think that we have very few. Oh. Commissioner Bravo?
Yes, speed things along. Everything I would have said has been said. I would identify Angelo Anchetta and Tangerine Brigham, and adding to the Central Coast, because one of us already is from the Central Coast, but adding to the southern part of the Central Coast, I would go with Lillian Judd.
Thank you, Commissioner Bravo. Okay. Commissioner Blanco?
So I have 3 choices as well, in no particular order at this time. Mr. Anchetta, who brings enormous wealth of knowledge on the area of redistricting and voting, and as others have said, I think we're a pretty diverse commission now, and so I'm not worried so much about those factors. The last few days, when we've been talking more about substance and less procedural, sort of setting up shop for business, I think I have been struck, and I think some of the commissioners have been struck by how much we're really going to need talent in the area of redistricting and voting rights. That no matter how many consultants we hire, and we can't hire a lot because of our budget, that we have to be very mindful of, that the more we have talent in-house, so to speak, among the commissioners, the quicker we can move with our work. And so that's a big factor for me with Mr. Anchetta. My other choice, I have two more. I think it's pronounced Olson. I'm not sure. I was very impressed with her knowledge of data, how she's worked with data. She's been a project director doing fairly complex research. Again, I think I'm leaning in a lot of my choices towards experience and ability to work with complexity, because that's what we're going to be doing, is working with very complex data and making difficult decisions. And her research really impressed me, and the fact that she knows how to direct projects, knowing that that's a hard, to be a project director means you have to be able to be on top of all the information and know where the gaps are, and know how to supplement them. And so I think that's a great skill that we need to have on this body. And my third choice was Ms. Aguayo Shubak. As others have mentioned, I think it would be very helpful. Her ability, her skill in sort of mediation, arbitration, etc., is, I think, very valuable. We've already seen that we're going to need those kind of skills, where we are able to get to the point quickly and facilitate conversations even among us and with the public. So I think that's a really great skill that we're a little bit weak in, I think. And so that would be my third choice.
Okay. Commissioner Yao, are you ready?
My three choices are Lillian Judd, Central Coastal area needs additional representation, and her work in United Way and community partnership is very impressive. Second, not in any order, is Bright Star Olson. Age diversity is an area we're lacking, and for a person of the young age, she certainly has accomplished a great deal. The third one would be Tangerine Brigham. Her work in public health also impressed me greatly.
Commissioner DeGiulio?
Okay, my three choices would be Amber McNamara, Bright Star Olson, and Lillian Judd. And I think, again, to reiterate what many people have said, trying to balance many of the criteria we had, I thought that the technical skills that Bright Star Olson brought would be of great value. I thought Amber McNamara, again, anticipated a lot of the issues that we are facing right now, and I think that was pretty astute of her at that time in the process. Ms. Lillian Judd also, again, is very experienced, though I do have to say the issue of the Central Valley representation, well, I think it's one where we are addressing. We do have a Central Coast representation. We do have a Central Coast representation, and I did struggle with that a little bit in terms of
as I present, but in terms of overall population, I think the first 8 commissioners did have an issue with other parts of the state that had very little representation, but percentage-wise and population also maybe didn't support having, it was taken in consideration, and I think the Central Coast also faces some of those challenges with overall population. And lastly, I would just like to say is one thing that I did take, I found very important to me was also the collegiality issue, and I did actually watch all the interviews over a very long period of time, because I did feel it gave a sense for individuals. We all look one way on paper, but one of the big things is keeping the momentum that we have going, and I was very impressed with these 3 candidates' ability to do that, and I think that's very important as we move forward.
Okay, as the chair's privilege, I get to go last. So in alphabetical order, I would put up Angelo Anchetta. I do agree with Commissioner Blanco that it's, particularly with our deliberation over chief counsel, the need for a Voting Rights Act and previous redistricting experience has become very apparent. I also really liked his sense of humor. I think he would be a fun member of this group. Second, I would put Tangerine Brigham up. Like Commissioner Yao said, impressed with her background in public health and in the nonprofit sector. So I think she would add something to this group. And last but certainly not least, Lillian Judd, for all of the reasons that have been stated. And I do believe that the first 8 of us were quite thoughtful, and she was the runner-up in the first round. I was also particularly impressed by her passion. Okay, so taking a look at this, we agreed to work with the top 3 vote getters and take any ties. We have a number of ties for 3rd place, and
We've only eliminated 1 person.
No, 2.
and I want to just throw out to the commission whether, since there's a very obvious break point after the first 2 candidates, whether we want to just move forward and consider the top 2 vote getters.
I think that's a useful suggestion, personally. And we might just go to the point, if we each get 1 vote, at this point, just skip the second round and go right to the final round.
Okay. Is there a general agreement on that?
I would concur.
I agree.
Okay. Sounds like we're ready to do that. I believe that leaves us with Mr. Anchetta and Ms. Judd. And we will go to the next block of voting. And I think this will be a hard choice, that we only get 1 vote here. I would also like to suggest to the commission that that we use all of our hard work here and consider having an alternate in case we lose another commissioner in the future, so that this could be expedited. So I wonder if whoever is not selected, that we officially designate that person as an alternate and ask that person to stay involved. What are some thoughts on that? Commissioner Yao?
I would second that motion.
Commissioner Brava?
I concur.
I'm going to dissent from that idea, because I think that we don't know who's going to be missing, and we will have pre-selected a Democrat but not pre-selected a Republican or an independent, and I think
Fair.
that's a mistake.
That's a fair point.
I agree as well, too. I'd like to keep it open for our discussion based on what position we need to fill.
Commissioner Wilkins-Weber?
I'm not certain that there is authority under the Voters First Act to consider an alternate. I would, unfortunately, given we would probably have to consider all of the factors necessary under the Act for the commission member that may resign, and therefore we would have to look at all of these factors again. So I don't believe that we can consider an alternate based on the provisions under the Voters First Act.
Excellent point. Any other thoughts? I actually didn't make an official motion, even though it got seconded, so I will unofficially, you got to, all right, so I will unofficially withdraw my unofficial motion. These are excellent points, and I think continues to demonstrate why a diverse commission is very valuable. I always appreciate the different points of view, things that I may not have thought of initially. Commissioner Forbes, do you have?
I just was going to get ready to vote.
Okay, let's go on.
Okay.
Let's go on.
I'm going to cast my vote for Angela and Chetta, and there's really two the reasons I said, the affirmative reasons I said before, but at this point, I think skill set trumps geography for me. The other thing is, I think when we talk about the Central Coast, and I think the point was made earlier that is true, that if you look at a map, there's no star there. On the other hand, there's no star in all of Northern California, north of Yolo County. And it's because there's not the population base there. And it's not because, it's just happening, it's like there's not much on the, over by Bishop, or, there's large parts of the state that don't have a lot of population. So I don't think the geographic component here is the decisive one. I think we need the skill sets that Mr. Anchetta has. That's why I'm going to vote for him.
Commissioner Baraba?
I would just point out there is a star in the in the Central Coast.
Oh, and
Okay.
such a star.
Such a star. Yes, the other commissioners have, who would like to go next? Cast a vote. Commissioner Galambos-Malloy?
Yes. I'd like to cast my vote also for Angelo and Chetta. I think given all the work we've been doing in closed session to really look at our resources that we have available, what type of expertise we need, I think this is the smartest decision that we can make.
Commissioner Baraba?
I would support the vote for Mr. Anchetta. I do believe his experience would add to the capabilities of the existing commission.
Commissioner Raya?
There's no denying Mr. Anchetta's skills and experience. That was skill set was farther down on the list because it's not one of the required factors in the law, and I think that's an important consideration. I also think that we should not underestimate, yes, it's a huge thing for us to really get completely up to speed on this matter, but I think we're capable of doing it, and I have a little bit of concern about it sounds to me a little bit like we're bringing on our VRA lawyer as a commissioner. And I think the other factors are important. We had a lot of discussion when we selected the 6 about doing our best to satisfy all of the diversity elements. One of them being geography. We struggled with that a lot in the selection of the first 6, trying to have as broad a reach as we can. One of the factors mentioned in Mr. Anchetta's favor was familiarity with rural communities, and I think certainly Lillian Judd fits that. We also know that our outreach efforts are going to be probably the most challenging aspect of our work, just in terms of creating it and setting it up. The rest, the information is going to come to us, but to go out, the maps and all that's, is going to come to us, but to actually go out and conduct the outreach, I think is a really major task, and for that reason, I would vote for Lillian Judd, because I think she brings those skills.
Yes.
I have a clarification, a question for our legal counsel.
Sure. Commissioner Galambos-Malloy, what is your question?
So my question is, I'm referring to a document that the first 8 of us received from the BSA when we were considering the final 6 commissioners, and in it, it quotes some of the legal guidance that we have to take into consideration. It says the 6 appointees shall be chosen based on 3 considerations, and it lays out the consideration around diversity, the consideration around analytical skills, and around ability to be impartial. Is there any precedence that any one of those considerations takes over the other 2, or are they all to be weighed equally?
I think they're all to be weighed. And there are a couple sections that talk about the basis for choosing. all of them, to one degree or another, include analytical skills as well as diversity. It doesn't indicate to you that there's a hierarchy of skills, but I think it's certainly, just my reading of this, it is certainly appropriate to consider the hierarchy in the law vis-a-vis any individual, but also vis-a-vis the total makeup of the commission. And analytical skills are certainly mentioned there with other things, as well as the ability to be impartial. So, but again, I don't see any hierarchy of skills, and I think you can consider it with regard to individuals. I mean, we've discussed, and I think in the training, that there's certain things you can't do. You can't choose an individual solely based on race or establish quotas. But you can certainly consider all of these factors in your choice. Is that responsive?
That's helpful. And then underneath analytical skills, the categories mentioned are gathering and comprehending information that bears upon redistricting, evaluating validity and significance of information gathered by the commission to make sound decisions about proper placement of communities in districts, applying appropriate legal standards, including but not limited to the United States Constitution and Voting Rights Act of 1965, and finally, working effectively as a member of a redistricting decisions that are factually and legally defensible and that the commission can agree upon.
I think your mic went out.
Well, you guys heard me.
I think that second iteration is their suggestions for how you would look at analytical skills. Unless you're reading from a regulation.
I can
And,
pull the regulation.
and I still think those are all good things to consider. They're not in the organic law itself, but they just are sensible things given your task and the skills you need.
According to this document, and I can pull the full document, these are pulled from the actual.
Section 60827.
Feel free to continue.
Oh, okay. Commissioner Wilkins-Weber, I think, was next.
I certainly agree that both of these candidates, obviously getting to the point that they're at right now, are more than qualified. But I would like to remind this commission that one factor that exists in the creation of the Voters First Act to begin with is that this was supposed to be a citizens redistricting group. A citizens group. This was not a panel of experts. So although we certainly recognize the expertise that Mr. Anchetta has, if you balance all of the factors, and if you look at all of the factors, including obviously his skill set in comparison to Ms. Judd, since we are comparing the two and making that determination, you have to balance also everything else in the Act, including ethnicity and including geographic diversity. So if we take a look at Ms. Judd and what she has to offer, her extensive project management skills, she's worked with the American Community Survey data for many years, which certainly fits into 60827 in evaluating the validity and significance of information gathered by the Commission in order to make sound decisions. It sounds as if she has certainly done that for her 30 years experience with, I think it was with her last job. She recognizes Section 5 districts for pre-clearance. She obviously brings a significant amount of experience in community outreach, and her interests in and knowledge of actually recognizing the challenge we may very well have as to identifying communities of interest. So on the one hand, analytically, you have a woman who can certainly aid us in her skills for community outreach, analyzing technical data, while on the other hand, you have Mr. Anchetta, excuse me, who brings expertise that we certainly can consult out for. And that's where I see that there's a big difference. If we also look at the other required factors, Ms. Judd is female. And if we also look at her geographic diversity, I feel that San Luis Obispo is an area that otherwise that we did not consider previously. So when you take all of these factors together, I feel she can bring more and fits into more of the categories that we are required to look at, for a candidate on this commission. So my vote is for Lillian Judd. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Commissioner Yao.
Again, one of the main criteria I use when we were selecting the final 6 commissioner was representation. I felt that skill set, I know we're tight on budget at this point in time, but skill set we can purchase or find and fill what we're lacking as far as a commission is concerned. But representation is something that's money can't buy. And besides everything that Commissioner Weber has identified, she also would represent the lower economic status group, and that's an area that I believe we're shied on. So on that basis, I think we're splitting hairs at this point in time. Both candidates are very well qualified, and based on the representation aspect of it, I think I would have to go with Lillian Judd.
Okay, who would like to go next? Commissioner Garrett?
Yes, certainly, these 2 candidates received overwhelming support from the whole present commission. The backgrounds and experiences of both of them are very compelling. And between the 2, I would kind of vote for Lillian Judd for all of the reasons that have already been stated, and not to diminish any of the qualifications of Mr. Ancheta, but I find that Lillian Judd, for one, I think economically living at that level, and also with her involvement with the Community Action Agency, which, as I mentioned before, really deals with, we might term, the underclass of society, and I don't mean that derogatorily in any way. So I would cast my vote for Lillian Judd.
Thank you. Commissioner Antai, were you going next?
Yes, I would concur. I am going to cast my vote for Lillian Judd. I think highest in my mind is she's representing a geography that I think would be helpful for this commission. And she does fall under the income level distribution that I think would help balance this commission and add some economic diversity. And her previous experience in community outreach is, I think, significant. So I'm going to cast my vote for Lillian Judd.
Thank you. Commissioner Blanco?
We are splitting hairs. I think we have 2 really great final candidates. My vote will be with Mr. Ancheta. I'm still stand by my comments. I know that we're really trying hard to have a citizens commission. I also think that we have really difficult work ahead of us, and that this is not just an exercise in democracy. It's also a job that we have to get done. That's a very difficult job, and the more relevant skills we have on on the commission, And I'm not saying Ms. Judd doesn't have analytical skills. I'm talking about skills related to the task ahead of us, that the better we'll be able to move and the more quickly we'll be able to move. So my vote is with Mr. Anchetta.
Okay. Who would like to go next? Commissioner DeGiulio?
To be honest, I've considered dissenting not because these are not two very qualified candidates and bring a very big skill set, but I did not feel they were my top choices. But based on the fact that I think a decision does have to be made, I'm going to go with Lillian Judd. I think while they're both very talented individuals, I do need to go back to what the proposition says about how we are to look for candidates. And based on that, I think the geographic diversity, the ethnic diversity is something that needs to be put into consideration here. My one concern is that we are not a very diverse group in terms of age, and with my vote, we become less so. But I do believe Ms. Judd would be an asset to this commission.
Commissioner Ward?
Again, I think both are excellent candidates, and we're lucky to have both candidates in this pool. My vote goes with Angelo Anchetta.
This was a difficult decision for me because I think they're both excellent candidates, as were all of the folks who made it to this level. I am swayed by Commissioner Yao's comment, as I was back when we were deliberating on the slate, which is that we can buy skills, but we can't buy representation. I also believe that we do need to focus on what the Act says, and there are required factors that we must consider. And I do believe that we could improve our geographic diversity by bringing Lillian Judd on, as well as economic status. It also happens to nicely balance out gender, once again, and brings another Caucasian commissioner onto the commission as well. So, having said that, again, my fellow commissioners know how much I value passion and motivation. I also think, not to diminish in any way, Professor Anchetta's interest in this and demonstrated experience, but I do think that that came through very strongly in her interview. That's something I tell my students, that you can't buy either. You can be very smart, you can be very skilled, and you can be completely, unmotivated, and that will make all the difference in the world in your performance. I also think her experience as a Census 2000 enumerator is highly relevant, and a strong background in the social services and social sector would be a great add to the commission. So Lillian Judd is my vote. So it may be obvious to everyone that we do not have the requisite 9 votes to replace a commissioner. It is also 10:35, probably time for a much-needed bio break. So I would like to suggest we take a 15-minute break, because some commissioners are going to have to change their mind for us to come to resolution on this today. So I hope that everyone would reflect on the comments of your fellow commissioners and see if that moves you to change your vote, and then we'll reconvene at 10 till, and hopefully we'll have ability to come to conclusion. Commissioner Aguirre.
Yes, and those requisite 9 votes need to be 333? No?
Actually, according to the Voters First Act, it is not stipulated that way. so, so it's not required. So I believe we should probably take the latitude to do 9 votes in general. Any other questions before we break? Okay, let's take a break and reconvene at 10 till and think about it. Thank you.